All right, welcome everyone. Welcome. Yes, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to give it a second as folks trickle in. But hey, everyone, my name is Monica and I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm excited to have y'all here with us. Hey, Campbell, what's up? We're going to get started in a few minutes, so please go ahead, grab your water, grab your headphones, tea, whatever feels nourishing. And just give it a second as we let folks trickle in. As we get started or as we are joining. Yes, Gamble, Jess, Juliana, thank you so much. Y'all know the deal. In the chat, please say hello to each other by sharing your name, pronouns, and where you are zooming in from tonight. So I see we got New York in the house, we got Florida in the house, New Mexico. What up, y'all? What up? Tony, thank you for sharing, raising your hand, but go ahead and drop it in the chat if there's anything you have a question about or anything like that. We have quite a few amazing organizers in the chat to answer any questions you might have and share any links. So I am going to put your hand down for now, but we are going to have an opportunity of just like deeper questions later on. So welcome. Exciting. It's been 2 minutes and we're already in the late 50s. So gonna give it a few more seconds, but just to kind of like get us into it, tonight is called Radical Love, Breaking Cycles of Call Out Culture and Embracing Call In Culture. And so before we get on started, y'all continue to let us know your name, your pronoun, and the state you're joining us from. Andrea from Colombia, living in Florida. What up? My family is also from Colombia and living in Florida. Love to see it. I see a lot of Florida here. Really amazing. I see Seattle, Queens, California. Keep it coming, y'all. Keep it coming. We're going to give it about 2 more minutes before we get started. Because we do have an activity towards the end and we will be sharing some really fun just prompts for folks to kind of dive into. So I do want to give it a second. Okay, Boca, I love that. Milwaukee, Seattle, New York. What up, everybody? Nevada's in here. We're going to give it a second. I said it a bit earlier, so if you're just joining us, go ahead and grab your water, grab your tea, grab your headphones, whatever the vibe is for you to cozy on up for this 1 hour workshop before we dive in. So you have about a minute or two to go ahead and grab those things for yourself. So feel free. Hello from Illinois. Context for everybody, I am in Detroit, Michigan. Hello, Texas. I love that. I can do two things at once. I hope so, but if it helps, towards the end, we're gonna have our activity portion. So we start off at kind of 7:30-ish, and we should be ending at about 8:30. So in the last 10, 15 minutes, if you want to like tap in real hard for our prompts or any continued learning we're gonna be sharing, please feel free. From now till then, it's gonna be mostly kind of workshop. I am gonna be asking folks to engage in the chat. So make sure y'all know where your chat is that you can type in. And then we have our awesome organizers in the chat right now that are going to share some links once we do get started. Hello, Delaware. I know, I'm also so tired of the cold. It's been so gray over here today. Yesterday we had so much beautiful sunlight, and today it just wasn't hitting. All right. So we're about the 36 mark, so I'm going to give us just a little bit of a start as we have more folks trickle in. But today is recorded, so that is great. We are going to be able to send this out for folks if you have to jump off or if your friend wanted to check it out later on. Um, but we're glad to have everybody here tonight, and I'm just really excited to see some names that I know and also see so many folks from home. We know Florida is going through it. So I'm happy to see y'all here. This month is our second session of the year. So if you missed last month's session, go ahead and you can drop it in the chat, or folks will share the recording once we have it up on a reachable site in the next few days. So we can make sure to send it out to you. But today we're going to talk about radical love and breaking cycles on call out culture and embracing call in culture. We'll have the chance to touch on call out culture and its impact, facing each other in moments of accountability, and ways that we can stay grounded in care for each other and care for the collective. But next slide. First, some logistics. So this is a webinar style due to the high volume of RSVPs. So please make sure to use the chat vigorously to connect with each other. And we also have Diana or Nina that have dropped in the chat that we're going to have, that you can reach our Moms Next Door group for a more person-to-person connection with the amazing moms and caregivers in this community. So we do have over 100 folks in that group already, and we do share resources there as soon as we can. And I did see somebody share, what is a call out culture? I don't even know what that is. So that was really exciting to see that, like, I'm going to be giving all of these definitions today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what that looks like. So an example of what that could look like larger scale, but also what it looks like smaller scale in your community. So today we're going to be covering accountability. What is it? What's the formula? From punishments to transformation, how are we seeing accountability play out in our communities, right? We keep us safe, and then a moment for reflection, which is a space for activity. So at that moment, you could use the notes app in your phone. If you have a notebook on site with you and you want to write something, I'm a notebook person, so I always have my notebooks with me. Um, all over my desk. And so at that time, if you want to grab a notebook, please go ahead. That'll be a space for just some reflection on how we are approaching accountability and allowing it to be in our moments in our lives and how we move throughout the day. So in the month of February, we focus on love, all types of love, right? Queer love, familial love, platonic love, romantic love. But when you think of love, do you think of accountability? As time passes, I've revisited a question with friends and hadn't realized that to me, one of the biggest ways that I feel, recognize, and show my love is through my commitment to be accountable to the person or the people that I claim to hold such tender emotions for. So, this kind of brought up a curious question that I hope I encourage everybody a food for thought as we work through this together. And so, to get us started, I'm going to be asking a few things that folks can kind of sit with and visit, and then we'll be looking for answers and solutions together, right? As a community and as a collective. And so we're talking about accountability today. And have you ever encountered the fear of being canceled? And now y'all can drop this in the chat if you want to, right? That's totally free, or you can just sit with this. But we will be journaling towards the end. So if you wanted to just take notes throughout the session, also for yourselves to see where you are when you first start the session and then where you are towards the end, please feel free. And we welcome the notes. But have you ever encountered the fear of being canceled, fear of being called out, or a fear of accountability? Right? And I think that kind of comes to later on with like, what is accountability and what does that look like for you and for your community? Have you been someone that has canceled someone, called someone out, or sat and thought about what accountability really looks like in your community right now? And so when we talk about, we'll be talking a little bit later on about like what we mean by community, but when we think about community, are you thinking about the micro, everybody that you see in proximity that you talk to every day, or the community that you engage with online, or the community that you work with beside them, right? Because we do spend a large portion of our day at work. And so those people could also be considered forms of our community. And if you have a following online, those are people that are an extension of your community as well. And so, what does accountability look like at all these different levels? So, today we're touching on the topic of accountability because, in such a heavy time, neighbors and community members struggle as to what is the fine line of accountability and what is canceling. We want you all to walk away with a clear understanding of what these things are and what type of accountability aligns with your values And where does the need for accountability come from, right? Is it something we do to keep safe, or is it something we do to shame? Is it something we do to humiliate, or is it something we're doing for learning? So we're going to talk about alternatives and preventative ways that we are incorporating collective care, especially now when everything feels so heavy, so painful, and just so gray. As we begin, I want everybody to think about how we're incorporating mechanisms of care and how we keep each other accountable, how we're doing this in our parenting, and how we're ingraining this and how we show up every day. And how is this tied to love? So let's start with a little nugget on why we need collective care in moments of collective trauma. Thanks, Olivia. Oh, I think it might want to share advanced settings for audio. Appreciate you. And so we're going to dive into this video in a second, and we're going to visit a portion of the video and then chat for a sec, and then we're going to revisit it to kind of close the loop on like, how is collective trauma and collective care tied together? And how does this even tie to accountability, right? But we're going to start here.
Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Scott Giacomucci. I'm a trauma therapist and educator in the Philadelphia area. And in this video, I wanted to talk about what is collective trauma. This is a term that's being used more and more nowadays. And I thought it'd be important to make a video just to introduce it and provide a general overview of collective trauma. So trauma is not always individual. Sometimes it's shared. Sometimes it's collective and communal. Collective trauma is simply a trauma that's experienced by an entire group of people, an entire community or culture or society. Some simple examples of collective trauma are genocide, slavery, colonization, wars, pandemics, natural disasters, racism, oppression, discrimination, religious persecution. These are all examples of collective trauma. Collective trauma is different than individual trauma in that the symptoms of collective trauma don't just show up individually. They don't just show up within an individual's mind and body, but they show up within the collective minds and bodies of the community and of society. That there can be this collective hyperarousal or this collective dissociation or this societal avoidance or this community re-experiencing and reenactment. It happens on a group and community and societal level rather than just an individual level. And collective trauma really can shape identity, can shape culture, it can shape society. Collective trauma is similar but different to intergenerational trauma, which is when the trauma gets passed down through generations, sometimes through epigenetics or cultural memory or family norms and values.
Hey y'all, I'm on mute. I'm gonna spotlight myself real quick so everyone can see me. And so we started with just some clarity around what collective trauma is. And so I'll tie a little bit later on as to like why we want to name this, and how it impacts so many facets of our lives, but also our community collectively. Um, collective, right? But we've always been told that the cure is you. How many folks have been told that like you can only fix yourself. You can only fix you. That is the only power that you have. And so I think that's sometimes why we want to tie this next part of the video in is because this is collective trauma happening to all of us. It is seeping into our society. It is seeping into how we react to each other. It is seeping into how we engage with community, how we engage with friends, the pain that we are actively feeling and how we react, right? And how we grieve because we are grieving. This is trauma. And so in this next video, we're going to understand a bit about how this is about all of us and how this can be healed through collective care. Thanks, Olivia.
rival. So healing from collective trauma can feel a bit more tricky than healing from individual trauma. Healing from collective trauma requires acknowledgement. It requires memorial. It requires truth telling, rituals and community practices, collective healing and collective repair. Collective trauma is often caused by social injustice, and it requires justice and systemic change. When the trauma is collective, the healing can't be individual. It has to be communal. That if we're traumatized in groups and communities, our healing also has to come through groups and communities. So I hope that this short video provides a general overview of collective trauma and the ways that it can manifest and the most fitting way of thinking about healing from it.
Thanks, Olivia. And so I was there in the chat also, Tony shared that I'm taught so much that it's me, that I'm to fix it. And so Dr. Scott talks about how we're all experiencing this trauma together. So how are you alone going to fix what we're all feeling, right? Because it's also impacting how we interact with each other. And you can't change that only through how you interact, right? And so this is something that we can only do together. The trauma of genocide, the trauma of colonization, and very immediately the trauma by ICE and police brutality. These are things that we're witnessing every day in and out. We open our phones, we talk to our friends, we step into the world, we turn on the TV. We're seeing this in our faces all the time, in our communities, amongst our friends, when we step out the house. So in these moments, many of you and us are feeling really heightened emotions, exhaustion, sadness, dread, and so much anger. And at times we don't have the capacity or the access to deal with the pain that is living and moving through our bodies. And so to ground us, I'll rename that. Last month, we talked about ways to hold corporations and billionaires accountable. And I noticed that somebody earlier named like accountability is to hold people that owe us that accountability, right? But we also want to think about how we are accountable to each other and how that is so grounded in love, right? And so we did last month, and we have the recording and we'll send it out to folks that didn't get to see it. So we want you to see it. We talked about boycotts and strikes and people power and how we can really influence all of these things. But today we're talking about an equally important way as to how we are handling accountability in our communities, while witnessing and fighting the horrors of everyday fascism. And so we want to have some aligned language, right? And so to have that aligned language, it's what is accountability? And I have two different definitions here. They're kind of hand in hand, but not exactly the same. And so for folks, I ask you to drop in the chat what comes to mind when you think of the word accountability. Somebody earlier named that like they are accountable to us. And I think that's a beautiful way of naming, right? Because there's different levels of accountability, there's different realms of accountability, depending on who you're talking to, the level of power they have. So what comes to mind when you think of the word accountability? But let's name accountability, right? An obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. And then the other way is a non-punitive, community-based process designed to address harm, foster transformation, and ensure safety without relying on the criminal legal system. And so that's kind of naming like, without us being the police for each other, how are we still holding each other accountable to moments of harm, but allowing for spaces of change, growth, and revisiting and bringing back safety from each other, right? Through conversation. So if we can go to the next slide, Olivia, thank you. Um, we've now named, right, what accountability is. And so there's different methods or approaches to accountability that people do. If you have seen one of these, drop it in the chat. If you've seen call out culture, cancel culture, call in culture, if you know one of these, drop it in the chat so I know what you know, right? But we're gonna go through the three of them and just kind of like, we're only gonna address the top four things. So where it happens, what kind of tone it generally has, the goal of that type of accountability mechanism, and then the general outcome that usually happens. And so we're also going to go through some examples, but cancel culture, we'll start with call out culture, right? So call out culture is generally public shaming. And sometimes and I'm not saying these are never helpful because many of these are helpful, but it depends on what level of impact you're trying to make and who you are talking to, right? Like you're not going to go cancel a little 5-year-old child, right? So how are you having, where are you approaching using these methods of accountability, right? So call out culture is public shaming. Focuses on pointing out someone's mistakes, usually it's online, and demanding change. So it aims to correct behavior, but can become performative and disproportionate sometimes. So it's usually on a public realm, usually very angry or confrontational, asking and demanding change. Accountability, so you're demanding for someone to make a change, and sometimes it can come to like, go learn about this. And at times it can lead to fear or it can lead to dialogue, depending on how it's handled. We know that a lot of these things also come with nuance. So I ask for folks to like hold the nuance that this comes with. And I really, your reflections and your questions are super, super helpful. Cancel culture. Cancel culture is very based in ostracization. English is hard. Ostracization, the extreme punitive end of the call out culture. And so the goal is to remove the person's livelihood, their reputation, their social standing, the power that they hold, and it often shut down dialogue in favor of punishment. And so this is shaming them publicly. And this is not me saying that it's not occasionally very, very useful for most moments that we need it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, right? But we want to think about like the macro when it's helpful, the micro, what it does to our community and to each other. And so it's generally something very public, viral social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, punitive and very shaming. That's the language that you kind of use, is like to shame that person, to silence them, to alienate them and remove them from community. So it depends on like the type of harm that they're done, but sometimes this can be done for people that have done different types of harm. That is not physical, that is not direct harm, right? Like there's ways that we have done sometimes cancel culture. Um, and how are we varying that, right? How are we creating moments of change? Um, and does that even happen through alienation? And so these are kind of things that we can talk about a little bit on when we're talking about like, who is this targeted towards? And so then it comes to the loss of platform or the loss of job. And so we'll talk a little bit later about like where this applies. And then there's call-in culture. So it's utilizing private, direct, one-on-one communication, such as like a phone call or direct message. And instead of public call out, it's an opportunity to investigate and then change. And so it comes sometimes with compassionate, respectful, or curious tone. And it's a chance to struggle together to build a just world. And so it leads towards education or transformation, and is grounded in usually radical love, respect, or acknowledging that people can learn and change. And so at the end, the outcome is learning and correction and not alienation from the community. And I'll move on because I am delaying a bit and I want y'all to get everything from this. But this is where we're going to kind of talk about like from punishment to transformation. And I'm going to dive into the chat a little bit because I see folks popping off and I love that. Um, I see here accountability is letting my friend know when they have spinach in their teeth with love. Right, right. You're not going to just like yell it across the table like, girl, you have spinach in your teeth. You're going to be like, hey, boo, like, right? Or like visit the bathroom, right? Because if not, it's like grounded in like shame. Like, why would I have that in my teeth? Being responsible for how issues affect others and be respectful of everyone's feelings. Thank you, Eleanor. That sounds like intention, but also impact is what I'm hearing there. Mimi said, accountability is following through with helping victims heal. I definitely hear that. I definitely hear that. It's like looking like, what is the resolution? How are we restoring something here? Um, I see that I've heard cancel culture, but feel it has been overused as a term for any time someone disagrees with criticism or something or someone. Right. And I think that's why we want to address here, right? Like, what accountability is actually leading towards change? What accountability are we applying in our communities where we're actually holding each other? Because at the end, we need everybody to be free. And um, sometimes it looks like having hard conversations. And hard conversations we have through love, right? Because only when I love you, I'm like, I'm gonna do this really hard thing because I care about you and I'm not like, gonna let you go out there looking crazy, friend, because I love you so much, right? Um, I think this is a real one here. There's a comment that said some people only react to being called out. They're not open to calling in until they're confronted to expose their position. Absolutely. And I think when we dive right now, when it comes to from punishment to transformation, we're going to talk about like, who are we doing the call out for? Who are we doing call-ins for? And so we want to think about like, yes, we are talking about macro when it comes to like calling ICE out, calling Kristi Noem out, calling Trump out, right? But then when we have that neighbor that might have said something a little off, are we just like writing them off and that's it, they're in the garbage? Or how are we addressing accountability in that moment, right? So I love these comments. Thank you so much, y'all. You're giving me life. Um, but yeah, so we're now diving into like from punishment to transformation. How are we seeing accountability play out? And is it aligned? If we are grounded in community, we are grounded in care, we are grounded in supporting each other, and we are grounded in our neighbors, that sometimes looks like not throwing someone away, right? That looks something really, really hard. If we are addressing people of a different cultural community or different language, sometimes that is going to be something like, what does it look like aligned for me to have an accountability conversation with this person? Um, and does throwing them away feel right when I believe that we should be working together to keep our neighborhood safe? And so we'll go to the next slide and just kind of talk a little bit of just like where does this apply when it comes to the macro and the micro community? Or like we can even just like kind of give it a little more like broad, like online versus in person. And you can even bring it like very specific, right? So you understand who you're talking about, like celebrity versus your neighbor, or celebrity versus a close friend, right? A longtime friend. So that way we're really grounded in just like who are we talking to when we name this? And so cancel culture. When we think of cancel culture, I'm going to ask y'all, okay? Everybody knows somebody that's been canceled as celebrity wise. So drop their names in the chat. Somebody that has experience, they've been canceled and drop their names in the chat. And so I'll talk to someone that's like for my more immediate and in my realm, right? But like Romeo Santos. Romeo Santos had a very Yes, I see Snoop in there. Right, right. A lot of folks. But Romeo Santos refused to make an ex and Prince Royce, thank you, Diana, that's exactly correct, did not take a position on ICE when their exact base is directly related to immigrants and migrants. And so a lot of folks felt like that's messed up. We stand for you, but you don't stand for us. And so when it comes to something so big like that, right? Target, exactly. Things that are so big and it comes to canceling them, we want to actually make them feel the impact of what they're doing and that what they're saying. They tried with Bad Bunny. I see you. Yup, yup, Apple Cook. Okay. Y'all are putting it in there. So we know what we mean by macro canceling. But we want to really remember like, are we applying cancel culture to our specific communities? And so sometimes that might look like a really hard time and something that really hurt you, but you are burnt out, you are exhausted, you are sad, you are depressed. And then it was your birthday and that one friend didn't show up. Or you have that one friend that just got a new partner and they just haven't been checking in on you. And you're like, that's it. I'm done with this person. They haven't showed up for me anymore. Trash, canceled, right? How are we showing up with our direct community members and having these hard conversations and recognizing that, like, where is the intention and how are we talking about the impact and not throwing each other away, right? Like, is that grounded in what we stand for and who we are and how we're going to keep uplifting our neighbors and fighting against ICE and fighting against police brutality and keeping each other safe, right? Like, how can we keep each other safe if, okay, you did me wrong, garbage. You did me wrong, garbage. You did me wrong, garbage. Who's going to be there to help me keep each other safe, right? So we're going to have conversations that are sometimes really hard where I'm like, actually, you really hurt me, or I was really hurt by this action, right? How can we resolve this and just get to a place of understanding together? Instead of me being like, girl didn't show up to my birthday. We're not talking again. She knows how important my birthday is, which actually my birthday is in a month. So this is very relevant. My birthday is very important to me. But how are we having conversations with each other when things like this happen, right? Creating a level of understanding, asking curious questions, and trying to understand like what happened here. And it might not be all about me, even though to me, my birthday's all about me, right? But we want to have these conversations. Yes, nobody forget my birthday, but we want to have these conversations of just like, how are we asking questions to understand, instead of to shame, humiliate, and judge, right? Having empathy and asking questions. Thank you, Gamble. So key, we are going to tie into all of this. And so when we tie to like who's been canceled, what happened to them? What culture does that set, right? So that means anybody that likes, so one person came to mind was like J.K. Rowling, right? Like canceled, transphobic, racist, all these things. So now what kind of culture does that set for anybody that has any kind of relationship with this kind of art or things like that? Dave Chappelle, right? Exactly, exactly. And so it's like, what are we telling people? What are we telling our children? What are we telling our friends? Right? You make this mistake and now there's no coming back from it. Right? So then we need to kind of feel and figure out which mechanism of accountability looks best for the specific folks we're talking to. And so if we go to the next slide, it touches on two different examples of call out culture. And so we can start with that video and then I'll dive into it.
Up here we go. Ludacris has dropped out of Kid Rock's Rock the Country Music Festival with his spokesman saying there was a mix-up about the rapper's involvement. There was a mix-up? It was a mix-up? They printed whole flyers. They printed flyers. Yeah, they didn't like spray paint his name on top of it or nothing. They organized it and got it all situated nice with his name. Yeah, that's what they did. It was the Blacklash. We know a cultural eject button when we see one. Black people looking at Luda after that flyer hit the net. Luda know good and well that wasn't a miscommunication. Here.
Right. And so he talks about how this is a moment where we had call out culture and it worked in our favor because this is where it applies, right? This is a person in power. This is virtual. And this is not like we're canceling them. We never want to hear their music again. This is like, bro, what are you doing? Why would you do this? Did you know this is happening? And so what we want to do is disrupt. We don't want this to happen. We want them to be informed that we don't want this to happen. It's when a person in power does not, they either refuse or don't recognize. And so the excuse with Ludacris was, my people did this. I didn't do this. I would never do this. Right. But we want to recognize that this is a person in power. They're not in our proximity. We cannot have a phone call conversation and be like, girl, what are you doing? Right. And so public accountability is necessary here. And so this is when call out culture feels really like 1,000%. This is how we're going to do it. This is the only way he's going to see that we all care. And so best practices would look like focusing on the action. A lot of folks named like the MAGA Fest. Why the MAGA Fest? It wasn't like Ludacris is a doodoo person. It was this is a MAGA Fest and it represents something harmful and horrible. Why would you do that? Right? The goal is accountability. We're not here to humiliate him. We're here to be like, tell us what's going on. Why we need to change this. And so what did he do? The impact was that he changed his behavior. He dropped out. It's not happening. He said, that's my bad, guys. I don't even know why that even happened, right? And so this is where call-in is not possible. This is the only avenue that we can do to make sure accountability is happening. But on the other hand, we have here, and do folks recognize what that is? The black square. Let me know if you remember from the time that that was. Drop in the chat. Um, Drop in the chat if you remember from what time that was. And so I'll give it like a second, but obviously I'm going to tell you. And so I would say in many spaces, if folks remember, there was the Blackout Tuesday that happened when the George Floyd uprisings were happening. And there was the murder of George Floyd, right? And so folks were on the ground, folks were in the streets, but there were also many folks that, and I would say folks, colleagues, community members, and influencers were just posting a black square and not doing anything with it, right? And if we followed the Blackout Tuesday Instagram page, they named explicit things they want you to do to disrupt the day, the silence of your personal promotion, all these things. Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly. I saw that in the note. It says call out works for those who don't care about others. And I would say like maybe Ludacris doesn't necessarily not care about anyone, but he doesn't care about me, Monica. He doesn't know me, right? So that's how call out would work is like he doesn't know me. He doesn't know Diana, but if me and Diana and Nina and Gamble and Tony and everybody are saying something to him, he's going to have to recognize and see us. But when it comes to the black squares, we had a lot of pain that was happening through folks that were on the ground and fighting for on behalf of like their black siblings and black community members. And then we see some folks that are like, I'm posting this black square and like, yes, girl, I'm doing the work. Right? I think there was a lot of moments that folks were calling people out on stories and saying like, I can't believe blah, 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 and tagging people and saying like, you're only posting the black square. Now, I'm not here to tell people if they're right or wrong, but this is a place where, because of proximity, because they are a friend or a colleague, because they are in your direct community, conversations are possible, right? And so when we want to think about like when are we doing call out, we want to reference like what is our proximity to this person? How in community are they with us? Are they in my community? Is this a space where I can have a conversation, right? And so just referencing, right, like folks that were there on Instagram watching others post the black square, and then I know you saw like the reels that were going around that they were like, this is performative, this is a distraction, this is harmful, and tagging creators' names. And so a lot of folks also tagged their own friends publicly to shame them and to alienate them and to humiliate them instead of having kind of one-on-one conversations as to like, girl, why are you doing this? Like, there's so much more we can do, right? Um, and sometimes it's really hard to have those conversations because we are in moments of pain. We are in moments of fear. We are imperfect people. So who am I to tell you? But at the end of the day, we also are grounded in community and care and love of this work and of each other together, right? And so those conversations are important because I don't want you out here looking crazy because I have so much love for you as a person that you are and you're in my community, right? So let's have the conversation. Um, Okay, I see some questions. Unfortunately, I'm running a little late, but I'll keep it moving and I will definitely circle back. And so let's go next, Olivia. And so I'm going to ask you all in the chat, what are society's norms for how someone should react in moments of grief, right? We talked about we're going through active collective trauma, right? So we are all actively grieving. We are actively grieving, like Black folks being murdered. We are actively grieving Black boys being murdered. We are actively grieving disabled children being murdered, right? We are actively grieving children being separated from their families, little kids being separated from their siblings. We are in grief as we watch this live on our phones, right? And so, what is society's normal for how someone should react in moments of grief, right? So, let's go next, Olivia. And so we think about that. When you're in a moment of grief, are you immediately like, I need to give my best self and react in the best way? Sometimes it's really hard. And so that's where I kind of try to like land us with like a lot of love, right? We are all grieving. We are all in pain. The Oppression Olympics does not save us. The Oppression Olympics does not help us, right? But we do need to recognize where folks are, and we need to recognize where we might offer a little bit of extra grace. And so, how is an accurate or like the best way that someone should be responding when they're in grief, right? And then there's conflict. So, when we go into the call-in culture here, right? Yeah, 1,000%. I think when it comes to, so Angela shared, like it's sometimes gendered how we react. I think even just like in part of that too, it's like the respectability politics around it. Like, don't be too loud, girl. Don't cuss at me. Don't be, and I think like those are all things that are really normal, right? Because for some folks, it can feel really harmful for someone to get very loud at them because it feels, something connected to childhood pain, childhood trauma, loud noises, disability, right? Like sometimes things like that are like extremely painful. And so sometimes it's also being like really cognizant about like you want to be your authentic self and you want to let a person react authentically. But how are we also making sure that we're having these conversations of like, I see you. And so I'll go into it a little bit later. And I think I appreciate like somebody, a Gamble, I think mentioned that like empathy is a big part of it. And then I want to tie it to curious questions. But here we talked about call-in, right? So when we talk about doing call-ins, this is a place where we are having the hard conversation with someone. I'm like, all right, friend, I love you so much. This is going to be so hard. I am so anxious about this, but I want to chat with you because I care for you and I don't want to alienate myself from you. And this could sometimes happen with like someone had a like did a microaggression or somebody has been, you might feel like, oh my God, I'm doing so much work on the ground. I am feeding families. I am filling, food pantries. I am walking kids to school. I am doing all these things. And my friend deactivated her social media and isn't responding to anybody, right? And so instead of you saying like, okay, they're not going to do anything, I'm not going to talk to them. How are you having a conversation to understand? How are you having a conversation for yourself too, with respect to their humanity and your humanity grounded in love, and the care for collective care, right? Because if that person is losing, right, then that is a member of your community that is losing. So, how are we kind of just like really sitting with each other and having these hard questions sometimes? Mind you, that doesn't mean like, okay, we just had a hard conversation getting a little loud with each other because we're both in pain and we're yelling at each other from pain. Let's deal with this right now. No, this looks like giving some space, right? It looks like definitely like this person is in proximity, this person is my community member. Let's give that some space. We got to let it breathe. It got a little hot. I'm really sad. I got a lot of anger, right? And so sometimes we do this to each other because we see the harm that's going on in the world. We kind of hold that in our bodies and we do it to each other. So how are we giving space to like, let's have these conversations in a bit? I think I want to like kind of ground it where a personal example for me would look like I have cultural differences with quite a few friends. And so for me, something somebody says might actually look like really disrespectful. And so I come in and I'm like, look here, friend. For my people, that was so rude, but I don't think you meant it rude. What did you mean with this? Like, how does that show up for you? How does your people handle that? And so we kind of open a space of conversation and like sharing our personal experiences with that specific thing. So like for my folks, we say, and I think some folks here have also experienced it, like I say yes, ma'am, yes, sir, right? It could be a child, it could be an adult, it could be, right? Like a lot of those things, it's just like my culture, we were raised that way. Some people got really offended, and that just happens, right? Because we're all very different. We have very different experiences. And so it just looked like, hey, I feel like you had a shift in energy. Like, can we talk about it? And we shared our experiences as to like where that comes from, how that looks like ageist, how that feels disrespectful in somewhere in some spaces, right? And so we kind of just shared like where my experience came from, like my own partner. I said like yes, ma'am, yes, sir, right? Like my little brother who's younger than me, yes, yes, sir, right? Like those are just things that like way my culture was made. And so it looked like having a conversation with this person because they are in close proximity to me. I care for them. And then just sharing like this is a part of me and my culture. How can we come with respect to like really understand each other? Sharing perspective and open space for dialogue. It's okay if there's disagreement, right? Because it just happens. We don't have to agree with everything, but how are we just like seeing the humanity and the truth in each other? And so at the end, this is really just grounded in the fact that we are humans and we will make mistakes. We are not asking each one of you and all of you and everyone, right, that we stand with while they're in grief and they're in sadness and they're in anger and they're in pain. And then also surviving capitalism, going to their work, handling their children, right? Like there's a lot that's compounded on someone's life at sometimes that we are not aware of. So how are we entering with empathy? How are we considering true intention? And then asking curious questions if we feel a little conflicted about what our understanding of the intention was, right? Space for time and reflection, right? Processing time. Like neurospicy folks, they can have like a big chat sometimes, and then they need a few days to process and give yourself some space to breathe and move through that, right? As a neurospicy person. And then opportunity to own the impact, right? Like, even if my attention was respectful, if what I did was hurt you, then we're going to just like talk about and how I did do that. I accidentally hurt you, and we're going to talk about it and move through it, right? Together. And then learning and growing and changing this behavior. And so we understand also like habits are hard to break and we really want to do better. And so just like we being committed to the love of our community and having these conversations um as we can, right? It's not saying like you're gonna have that conversation with that friend every single time. Look, rest is real, rest is necessary, joy is essential. And so sometimes you really can't turn back and have these conversations 1,000 times in a week. So you might need a little bit of space. But how are we making sure that we're not throwing our community members away? Because at the end of the day, we need each other. Okay. So let's move into, yeah, we keep us safe. We need to learn how to love people more than we hate the empire by Christabel Minta Galloway. Really amazing page on Instagram, so I can send the page in the Moms Next Door group. But they talk about race, gender, and also respectability politics and collectivism and individualist culture. And so that ties a little bit as to like how we already incorporate collective care in our lives from the beginning to the smallest ways to our work to how we interact with our friends. Um, and so we're going to talk about how we handle conflict because at the end, we are all we have and we keep us safe. And so in the next slide, when we say we keep us safe, what are we talking about? We're talking about moving away from methods of punishment and carceral practices, right? We're not trying to create jails inside of our community explicitly. We're trying to figure out ways that we are transforming each other. How are we moving through methods of care? How are we creating community-based prevention within our communities that we exist in right now? How are we doing that in small ways every single day, right? And so in order to build the village, we have to all be villagers. And so that looks like doing really small things to contribute. And so a safe community is to be a community member, ingraining change in your way of interacting. So it's emphasizing collective community-based care, mutual protection, mutual aid work. So it looks like and I have it here, folks. So it'll be like neighbors looking out for each other. And now, what does that mean, right? Because we can name something general like that, but how does that tangible? And so that's creating a single signal group with your neighbors in your building or on your block, right? So if you're in an apartment building, like, do you have a renters chat? Do you have a chat with just like your floor where you guys can keep tabs with each other or just like let folks know if there's something that's happened on the floor? Hey, I have some extra, potato salad that I'm not going to eat. Hey, I'm about to go travel. I have a bunch of food left over. Who needs it, right? How are we taking care of each other in small ways? There's other ways of like helping elders navigate online platforms or their electronics on occasion, right? Our elders are a giant and very important and critical part of our villages and of our communities. And so, how are we continuing to take care of them, right? Because this is collective care. Need this care. And one day we will be in that place where we also need that care. So, how are we doing that now and creating that system now? And creating also that like as like a norm, right? If your children see you do this kind of work and take care of your neighbors and your elderly folks on the street, it'll be something inherent that they just try to do, right? Like it's a norm that exists in their life. And so also when it comes to sharing information, how are we keeping us safe? So that looks like Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp stories to share sightings if it happens of ICE or mutual aid. So that might look like, hey y'all, I have some extra food that I made this week. I can't eat it. Who wants it, right? If you have a close friends. So obviously I'm not saying like if you're a public platform and you have like 10,000 followers, I'm not saying to post that on your stories. But if you have WhatsApp, there is a story feature on WhatsApp. If you have a close friends list, there is a close friends list that you can share those things, right? Because that is a way that you are incorporating your community. If you're not seeing them in person, this is one where like you're using your virtual platforms to still maintain that close-knit community because you are still in proximity with each other, right? It's just something that's a little more accessible when it comes to looking through information. And then resisting harm together. So how are we creating community defense centers in our neighborhood? We've seen that Minnesota, like, it's very, very community based. It's on the ground. It's every neighborhood. Every neighborhood has their folks that are supporting with crosswalk. We have folks watching, like, what are the cars that are coming in? Like, are the teachers getting to school? Are who's getting picked up? Where is ICE? How are we combating ICE, right? Like, it's very grounded in neighborhoods. So how are we creating these? How are we creating these community defense centers in our own neighborhoods? And that doesn't mean you're popping up a building, right? Like I can't pop up a building, girl. Like I cannot pop up a building in this neighborhood. No phones, not things, but how am I creating a hub where I'm making sure that everybody has access to like their know your rights information, that they know the hotline that they can call, that they know that these are alternative numbers to calling police, right? Because like we don't want to call police in this house. We don't want to call police on the street because what they're going to do is they're harming. So what are the alternative numbers that I already know that I'm sharing with my community member? And then how am I supporting you with keeping track of things? And then also, like I said, unified language around harm. So I'm going to move on a bit, so I apologize, y'all, but proactive networks of care, so spreadsheets of, or basic inventory of skills, offers, resources available, and then opportunities for co-regulation. And so we can never forget that a part of keeping us safe also means enjoying, and joy is a form of resistance. And so, how are we having our barbecues? How are we having our little parties? How are we having our little coffee dates? Like, hey, y'all, I got coffee galore. Come by, grab a cup. Right? How are we doing things like that? Sometimes folks work fully remote. And so, how are we making sure, like, hey, I have a little coffee shop day. Like, I don't have coffee, but you can bring coffee and you can come co-work and use my Wi-Fi because it's paid regardless, right? So, how are we doing things like that to bring in each other? So when we are in proximity to each other, it also looks like having conversations if a value was or a boundary was broken because we care for each other and we want to have those kinds of conversations because we will keep each other safe and through these conversations. And so I'm going to move us into and I am going to tie into a question. So thank you, Diana, to flag for that question that we have there. But I want to make sure at least I share this, even if I can't do the 5 minutes for us to do a prompt. But there are many, many links in the chat. And there will be a few more as to just like books y'all can dive into. And your girl likes, I love books. But here are just some really great prompts that might help y'all to like dig into how you are doing this at home. I know we're talking about this as a concept, we're talking about this in general. I know I gave some specific ways that you can do this in your neighborhood, but how are we just thinking about how we are doing this in our heart and in our families and in our immediate nuclear families? So, how am I also having accountability conversations and showing through my methods of accountability to my child, right? Like, what is one practice that grounds you when things are chaotic? So, these are journal prompts for love and care that build the liberated future that you want. And so, can we release our binary ways of thinking of good or bad in order to collectively grow from the mistakes, right? I'm going to read right through them and then I'm going to dive into one of the questions, okay, folks? So if you want to take a second for this, go ahead. We'll do this for about like 3 minutes. So I will make sure that I pop these into the Moms Next Door group so you have them there. Where do I notice people or places in my community relying on each other? How can I shift from a mindset of ownership to one of relationship within my local area? What does it mean to me to move from individualistic goals to a collective vision of a more compassionate world? And then what causes or issues most deeply resonate with my values and passions? And so this is just an opportunity to like kind of think through about how we are creating we are incorporating community care in our everyday. We are incorporating community care in our self-care, right? Because self-care and community care can happen at the same time. I can have a little day where I'm, deep washing my hair and then my best friend is reading a book, right? That is still, we are caring for each other. We are giving each other space. And so just really, really amazing things that we can do. So one of the questions I have here is, how do we bridge the gap versus alienating? And I want to recognize I might not be able to answer all these questions because we are close to time. We have about a minute left for folks that are doing the journaling activity. But I do want to name that we do have the Moms Next Door group and we are going to be responsive there. So if I don't get to these questions here, please feel free to drop them in there. All of the folks here are in that chat. And so I'll name it out loud even if I can't necessarily directly get to it. Um, Right. Okay, I hear this. How do we bridge the gap versus alienating, such as the male gender being called out by standing up for ourselves in moments that are non-negotiable? I have a male friend who is an ally who has been getting tired of hearing the same issues. He feels true change is incremental, and these pushes for equality are actually dangerous for women, i.e., misogyny rises before progress, and the attempt to quell it. Ooh, that is a big question. Um, I think I want to give space for a few of our folks because we have quite a few organizers and directors that are also in that space. And so I want to give space for folks to answer that in the Moms Next Door group. Adrian, are you open to that? And you can just give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat. Just okay. I appreciate you. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Just to make sure that I also am able to share some resources with y'all. So if Olivia, you can go next. And so we did a lot of talking. We did so many, so many um yeah, just like reflections and things here, just like what we can and we're looking to do and like when and where it applies. But here are some books that are also really helpful in just like creating collective care and in solidarity in our community. And so We Keep Us Safe is a book. The Care Manifesto is a book by the Care Collective. Emergent Strategy, Friends in Common. If you press next, we'll also have a few more books and Let This Radicalize You. Um, Big Friendship, How We Keep Each Other Close. And so I have quite a few of those here. And then there's just one more that I have that is We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice, right? And so I know that either Diana, Nina, or Olivia can post just like a list of books to help cultivate care, community, connection, and solidarity. And so y'all have an array of options for books that you can use for continued learning because this is something that we're really growing through and working through. And just to like also name for folks, give yourselves so much grace because we are unlearning methods of policing. We are unlearning methods of punishment. We are unlearning that the only way to make change and to be accountable to the harm that we've done is through punishment. And so give yourself grace when you're really thinking about like, how am I having these conversations with people? And not being grounded in, I need to punish you because you did something wrong. More like, how are we working through this and struggling together to build a just world, even though it felt like you already had done something that didn't feel so comfy, right? And not just not comfy, it felt harmful, right? And so having these hard conversations and holding hands, not physically, but holding hands in these spaces and giving our heart like that is something really important. So yeah, I shared those books. We shared a few links. There are some Instagram posts, like there's link to books, so y'all can dive into those. If you have Libby, I also encourage a lot of Libby. Libby is connected to your library card. You can have it right on your phone. You do not need a Kindle. So if you don't want to be shopping on Amazon, you do not need a Kindle. You can just do it right on your phone. I also have Libby on my phone. And that's how, yes, we absolutely love our public libraries. Gamble 1,000% all up on that. Yes, Jen. And so you can download these books for free. Depending on the library. If your library does not have the book, you can sign up for the Queer Liberation Library for free, no matter what zip code you have, and you can download the books that are there if it is available. And so I'm going to close this out because we are basically at time, but I really appreciate all of you. I'm so sorry I spoke quite a bit fast towards the end. I am so grateful for just like all the engagement. Um, all the comments. I'm so sorry, y'all. I didn't get to dive into all of them, but you are amazing. I'm so happy you are here. And just so you don't miss it, we do have a Moms Next Door session every month. And so our next session is March 31st. So it is local change making, local levers for change. And so the mobilize is in the chat. So if you guys have not signed up, please go sign up. It is about to be placed in the chat. And then we also have our amazing February dispatch, which went out the first week of February. If you did not receive it, that is totally okay. Our amazing organizers are dropping it in the chat right now, so you can go check it out. It has really amazing resources. If you are just like not able to attend a workshop, mind you, they're not all recorded, so I do encourage you to attend. But if you're not able to attend a workshop, check out the dispatch. It has so many resources, petition links, storytelling links. So if you're looking to get involved with us in ways that you haven't before, there's ways that you can just share your story. We know that there's a child care funding freeze. We know that healthcare is under attack. We know that ICE funding has been overwhelming. So there's so many ways that you can just share your story with us as to how these things are affecting you and impacting you. And the SAVE Act, thank you, Nina. So thank you so much, y'all. We appreciate you. And then feel free to join our Moms Next Door session. I'll be posting all the journaling questions in there, and then I'll also make sure to post some of these links. So you can just reference back to them later on. We also have reminders for all of the meetings in there. And then we are looking to also incorporate just a little bit of like open hours for chat for folks that want to engage a little more. And so that will also be launched in there for all of you to join us a little bit and just talk about how you can incorporate a lot of this in your communities. We don't do these sessions just for funsies. We want this to give you tangible ways that you can go back to your friends, your neighbors, your community, and incorporate community defense systems. So, um, heck yeah, Adrian. I love that. I plan on running for school board later this year. We love to see it. And so, unfortunately, we are at time, y'all. We are 1 minute over, but I appreciate all of you. You are all amazing. Um, thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us. And I hope you have an amazing night. Thank you.